Kia ora koutou. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, the Auckland candidates, this evening. We are very excited to be with you, and I will introduce you to everyone in the Auckland team in just a moment. My name is Shaina Voort. I am the Deputy Leader of TOP and the candidate for the North Shore. So just very briefly about myself, I was a lawyer. I was a lawyer here in Auckland for 7 years. I prosecuted and did civil litigation, and for one reason or another, I got bullied into running for TOP, and I'm so glad that I did. I loved my job, but ultimately got really sick of being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And when I looked around, TOP was the only party I could see really focused on those underlying issues and addressing those rather than the symptoms or ignoring the issues altogether, which is a lot of what we've seen from this red-blue rewind of the last 30 years, where all of our key issues are just getting consistently worse. So it's time for change. So that's why I am here. You'll hear more from me a little bit later on, but I just want to introduce you to the rest of my team now. So first of all, starting out west, we have Brendon Monk, who is our candidate for Te Atatū. Hi, Brendon.
Hey, how you going?
Good, how are you?
Shai. Hey, I'm really good, yeah. So you want to hear a few things about me and why I'm with TOP?
Tell us about you and why you're here.
All right, well, my name's Brendon Monk. I'm an architect and I'm standing as candidate for Te Atatū. I've been involved in TOP since TOP came about before the last election. A few fun facts about me before I talk a bit more about TOP. I was born in Queenstown and moved to Dunedin when I was young. I rose to fame early at the age of 7 at St. Paul's School in Porstefine, where I was the only boy who could pee out the top louver above the old urinal around the back of the church. And later in my teenage years, moved to Auckland, where I went to university. I became the Auckland shotgun champion, which is not the shooting type, and hamburger eating champ. I managed to graduate with a degree in architecture, and I've worked in all sorts of areas of the building industry, from different sorts of construction through obviously to working as an architect. In between, I've also worked as a counsellor at a psychiatry clinic in Japan. And at some point in my young years, I stuck Easter egg halves together in a chocolate factory. Now, my passion with TOP is to do with housing and urban development. But somewhere along the line, I think I've gained a reasonable social conscience and a wider understanding of what sustainability really means. Not just for housing, but in the wider view of how we should be living, how we should be managing ourselves in a way that meets our... Oh, I'm getting a big feedback. Where's that coming from? Managing ourselves in a way that meets our current generation's needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Now, that takes a team effort. All society has to be involved there. Now, COVID-19 has shown us that, one positive thing is that a government can respond to a serious challenge, with some decent leadership and a strategy designed by industry experts, and, be as close to a winning team as I guess we can in a difficult situation, and even dare to call ourselves a team of 5,000. But have you heard of a thing called, that's a big crisis, but have you heard of a housing crisis that we're in? We have not been winning there, not for ourselves and not for future generations. Whether it's the fact that we have the highest house prices in the world, driven by the most imbalanced tax system in the world, which is driving higher inequality. We've got a lot of environmental issues, creating inequality, loss of biodiversity. On all these fronts and many more, we are handing all of our and grandchildren for want of a better word, giant shit sandwich. And a lot of us voters have already had a taste of that, and it ain't nice. Now, what I firmly believe is that we need to embrace a much better worldview. And for that, we need to get a set of coordinated and uncorrupted policy and people into government. And that change really starts with top. So that's what I'm all about. So I'll hand it back to you, Shai.
Thanks, Brendon. And I'm so sorry, I should have said as well, Brendon is our spokesperson for housing and urban development. Don't know if we mentioned that. I might have forgotten. Okay, so moving in from West Auckland, we have Cameron Lloyd, who is our candidate for Mount Albert. Hey, Cam, how are you going?
Hi, I'm doing good.
Introduce yourself and why you're with Top.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Cameron Lloyd. I'm TOP's candidate for Mount Albert. I was born in Whakatane, but I've lived in Auckland all of my life. I went to Westlake Boys High School where I rowed. I've got a couple of national titles in rowing over my time, being a keen yachty and surfy and kiteboarder, those sorts of things. My parents are still here now up in Orewa, and my sister's married and has a couple of nephews over here in Greyland, and I live here with my partner and our boy Dylan, who's just recently turned 11. I left school and went into a cadetship to train as a quantity surveyor. QSs do cost management in construction, so I've worked for a commercial construction contractor since I left school, or several of those over sort of various 10-year stints with a number of big and small contractors, and I've been an independent contractor in that field myself for the last 5 years. As a young QS, not quite out of my time and not yet qualified, on a fairly meagre salary and still studying part-time, I was able to buy my first home in Western Springs. I bought a 3-bedroom house for $108,000. It was about 1992. That house is now worth very much more than $1 million. And my equivalent today would have no chance whatsoever of buying that house in the equivalent position as I was in those days. Not today, and quite possibly never in their lifetime. I did a little stint overseas with Fletcher Construction. I spent a bit of time in Guam, and when I came back, I did an arts degree. I had an idea that I might like to do clinical psych, and so I took an arts degree. I did psych major and a multi-language minor. Clinical psych is very tough to get into. They have 750 applicants. They interviewed 25 people for, I think, 11 places, and so I got one of the 25 interviews, but I didn't make it into the clinical psych program, and so I returned to quantity surveying to earn my living. But I really enjoyed my time at university. I was obviously there as a mature student in my 30s, and became really interested in academia and research and science and things, and philosophy and all sorts of stuff. And so when I came out of there, I was following a number of think tanks, including one of which was the Morgan Foundation. I had known for a long time that political parties were never going to deliver this sort of change that I thought was possible. We have very centrist, conservative, middle-of-the-road governments here that tinker with peripheral, marginal sort of issues, but don't really have the courage or ambition or political will to do anything really meaningful to affect any sort of real change. So I've never been particularly enamored with any political party, but was obviously, I was a lot more interested in what people who weren't constrained by popularity contests or stuck in the middle of the road political parties were saying about how we could solve some of our biggest problems in the country. And the Morgan Foundation was obviously one of those. And so when Gareth announced that he was forming this party, I jumped on board. I was really excited about it and was a volunteer in 17, and I've volunteered since. I've been a regional coordinator here in Auckland, and that eventually led me to being a candidate. The thing, I guess, about TOP is it is based on research and based on evidence, and it's completely fearless and courageous in the pursuit of solving those major problems without the limitation of what's popular, what could win votes, or what could play well at the ballot box. And I guess there's a false sort of a narrative out there in mainstream politics now that, you know, Blue's the party of business and Red's the party of society and Green's the party of the environment. And there's this false idea or narrative that you have to choose one or the other. Well, people that dig into this stuff recognise that, in fact, you don't have to make a choice. You can proceed to get outstanding radical change and radical improvement across all three spheres, you know, economic, social and environmental. It's possible to get all three of those things moving together. And in fact, the things that are causing problems in one of them are the same things that are causing the problems in other areas. So it's totally possible to do this stuff. You just need to have the courage to do what it takes. So that obviously appealed to me, and that's what I like about it, and that's why I'm into it.
Well said. Thanks, Cam. Thanks. And now we'll move into central Auckland, and we have Tuariki Delamere, who is TOP's candidate in Auckland Central. Hang on. I think you're still on mute.
Okay, hear me?
Yeah. Good.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Shai, and greetings to all of you. Sorry for the hiccups. I worked out what was going wrong with my computer before. It was still thinking it was in the office back in central Auckland rather than here at home. So I shut it down and rebooted it, and hey, I'm on the laptop rather than the phone. Anyway, I was born at Green Lane. I was an army brat and went to Papakura Normal School. I always used to wonder where the abnormal kids went to school, but I went to the normal school, which is on down where the camp used to be. And there's probably not many of you were aware of there being a big army camp back there. Cameron looks like he's old enough, he might. But anyway, my old man, my dad was the equivalent of the regimental sergeant major. And so I was there for about 8 years. Then we moved to Tauranga, went to Tauranga Boys College, did reasonably well in academics and sports. And at the end of high school, I accepted a scholarship and went to the USA. And at Washington State University, did my bachelor's there and also competed in athletics for the university and, you know, the national champs, et cetera. And while there, I realized some of you discovered that I did a thing called the somersault long jump back in May 1974 in the LA Coliseum, and sort of gained me a bit of notoriety. And because of what I did, about 8 months later, they banned the somersault. So I still have the world's longest official somersault because no one's allowed to break it anymore. But anyway, after that, I ended up at United States Military Academy at West Point as an instructor. I was in the US military, US Army for 4 years during the end of the Vietnam era. So my first commander-in-chief was Richard Nixon, then Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. And as bad as Nixon was, I'd rather have him 1,000 times over than the current person at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but never mind. After that, I came back to New Zealand, and over the next sort of 15, 20 years, did a variety of things in the accounting world, and also being the New Zealand manager for a US mainframe company. The biggest sale was something back in 1986, and I imagine most of you at various times go out and waste a few dollars trying to win the 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million in lotto. I sold the lotto system back in 1986. And so I was into selling computers, but I was also financial controller for John Spencer at Caxton Paper Mills down in Kawerau, and then over to Samoa for 3 years as financial director for the National Airline. And then I got bored with all that. In 1990, I accepted an offer to be the government's manager of treaty negotiations. And very interesting job. And I remember one of my first hui I went to was at Judia Marae in Tauranga. And I was scared witless because it meant I had to get up and do my first whai kōrero in Te Reo Māori. And then my uncle, Monita, or Sir Monita Delamere, was there. He was the bee's knees on the tribunal. So I said to my uncle, "Oh, gee, Unc, thank God you're here. It means I don't have to get up and do my whai kōrero." And he looked at me and says, "Nephew, you're not here as a Delamere. I'm not here as a Delamere. I'm here as the tribunal. And you're here as the Crown. And see all those old fellas sitting on the other side there? They all want to rip the Crown's head off. So you're on your own." So that was my introduction to doing kōrero Māori and the treaty. Then in 93, a little short Māori fella from up north, a fella called Winston Peters, wanted me to stand for the Wairarapa for New Zealand First. And I said, "Nah, I'm not going to do that." And he called me up a couple of times, usually about 2 a.m. I still wouldn't do it. But over the time, I decided, yeah, next time I will do it. Now, some of you may remember 93, that's when Tau Henare got in. When I wanted to run for a Māori seat. And the reality, if you want to go to Parliament back then and run for a Māori seat, you only had 2 options. One was Labour, and New Zealand First were coming on. And a distant relation of mine, Doc Weerepa, was the candidate for Tuariki, which is basically Gisborne through to the Coromandel, including down to Taupo. And Doc decided to be really clever on, I forget what they call it. The last day you got to sign up. Doc got all the media together, and at 5 to 12 they turned up at the office in Gisborne to register himself as a candidate, filled it in, handed over his, $200-300 in a personal check. "We're sorry, Mr. Weerepa, the law does not allow us to accept a personal check. You must pay in cash or a bank check." "Oh, but I don't have the cash." "Well, sir, you have 5 minutes to get it." No one had the cash. So he runs down to the bank, comes back with a bank check. "Sorry, Mr. Weerepa, it's now 12:10. You're not in." Winston was pissed because that seat was probably going to go before Tau won his seat. So anyway, I thought, oh, that's me. I'm moving back home. I'm moving back home to the Bay of Plenty because my tribal connections are Te Arawa, Rotorua, and Te Whanapunu Whakatō here. And I managed to sort things out, got the candidacy, and in 96, I entered Parliament. And those older ones will remember we had the balance of power. We had unbelievably 17 members, and we negotiated 9 ministers. Only 4 of New Zealand First candidates ever been in Parliament before, and we had 5 cabinet ministers. So one of us had to go into cabinet who'd never been there before, and I was the lucky one. But anyway, it was a interesting time there. I was the associate treasurer, and during the budget, I refused to support the budget. I told them, no, I ain't supporting the budget. And it was over the issue of cultural funding. Now, the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, the Royal New Zealand Ballet were getting millions of dollars, like I think about 3 million for the ballet back then and about 6 million for the orchestra. And I wanted the Matatini, which is the Māori Kapahaka Cultural Championships, to get something. But Doug Graham, in his pompous way that Doug is, no, sorry, because he was the Minister of Cultural Affairs. No, can't do that. This is about real culture. I said, well, F you, you prick. I told Bolger, I ain't supporting the budget. Well, that's sort of outrageous that the Associate Treasurer is not going to support the budget. Why is that? And I told him, oh, you're right. Will $1 million do? Yeah, that'll do me, Jim. So we got $1 million. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's one of the reasons I joined TOP is, see, my feeling of TOP is that it's the party that tries to get it right, irrespective of the politics. And that's one of the reasons I contacted Shai and Jeff, well, it must be about 3 months ago now. And then Shai says, oh, why don't you turn up at our little hui and it was a Point Chev? Anyway, the RSA.
In Greyland.
Yeah, the Greyland RSA. I was probably the only real person entitled to be there in the first place. You know, as far as being in the military. And that went, you know, well, I was there to sort of critique and shoot people down, so to speak, just to say, if you say that, this is what's going to come back at you. And anyway, that was fun, enjoyed that. And then we fast forward, about 3 weeks, and the National Party decided to reinvent the definition of what's a long time in politics. And normally it was always a week. And the National Party decided 24 hours was a long time, like 4 days in a row, stuff happened. And the fourth day was when Nikki Kay decided she was out of there. So I thought about it and I got hold of Shai and Jeff. Oh, if you like, you know, I'll throw my hat in the ring for Auckland Central because I've had my business there for 20 years. I've got my immigration consultancy there, and for 12 years we had a drag queen nightclub. So I'm pretty au fait with the LGBT lot. They're all nuts, but they're all good friends. And interestingly, when I was Minister of Immigration, my first decision was I called the general manager over. I was announced at 10:30, met with Chris at 12 o'clock and asked him how things were going. And wow, it was wonderful, Minister, this, that, and everything else, Minister. And says, oh, how about the partnership stuff? Oh, that's great. Says, how long does it take for hetero couples to get residency? Oh, they must have been in partnership for 1 year. Oh, that's good. What about gay couples? Oh, 4 years. Oh, bring it down to 1 year. Oh, but Minister, you can't do that. Yeah, you're right. Take heteros back up to 4 years. What? You can't do that? Yeah, I can. I'm the minister. It's going to be the same, bro. I don't care whether it's 4 years, 1 year. It's going to be the same. We're not going to discriminate. And so anyway, that's been my sort of attitude. Take things on. Some of you may have seen, had a bit of interview on some radio station today over one of my clients got arrested on Friday in Napier. He's an overstayer. And I managed to keep him from being sentenced to prison on Monday. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not like Shai. I'm not allowed to turn up in court, but I sent the judge some submissions, which he used. And over the great protest of Immigration New Zealand, the judge refused to incarcerate him at Mangaroa prison. But the real issue for me is with COVID-19. And I'm negotiating, or not negotiating, I'm in contact with the Prime Minister and Minister of Immigration. All overstayers should be given an amnesty right now, temporary amnesty, not residency, just because we need them to feel safe to go get tested for COVID-19. And right now, you know, the Pacific community that had that breakout in Auckland, there's hundreds of overstayers in the Pacifica community, and they're not getting tested because they're scared they'll be arrested. And one of them could be the super carrier that turns us into Melbourne. But anyway, look, I can rave on. That's me. I'm got a place down in the Wairarapa and a place here in Auckland, in Westmere. All the snotty nose people ask, we're here in Westmere, right across from the school. I've got 3 kids, 8 grandkids. The oldest grandchild is 22. She's miserable. At least she's miserable to me. But no, they're all great.
Thanks, Tuariki.
So anyway,
okay,
that's
cool.
me.
Great. And thank you very much for that. And finally, but not least, we have Adriana Christie, who is our candidate over in Epsom.
Kia ora. How's everyone? Everyone's good? That was very interesting. I loved listening about all of you guys. It makes me really proud of being a part of such an epic team. I am Adriana Christie. I was born in Colombia, South America. My grandparents are Kiwi. They were missionaries from Auckland to Colombia in the 1960s, and they started a bunch of social work programs. When I was 4, my dad, so my mom's born and bred Auckland, and my dad's Colombian. And when I was 4, my dad picked up some kids from the street in Colombia and brought them home. And 3 months later, I had 30 brothers and sisters. So my first years in the world were really interesting. My dad was teaching my brothers how to do carpentry, and my sisters how to do hairdressing and sewing. And, you know, he was really entrepreneurial since the get-go. My parents decided to open up a private school in Colombia that's bilingual, and they inherited my granddad's Christian newspaper company. So I come from a really conservative but loving background. I decided to run away from my family to be an independent person and start my own kingdom after working for my parents during my school holidays. I wouldn't be able to go and hang out at schools. I would have to go and paint the classrooms of the school that my parents had, or help out with all the things that they had to do. But actually, I learned quite a lot. My first failed business was when I was 13. I proposed to my dad that I wanted a free-range chicken farm. And my dog killed half of them, and then the flu killed the following third of them. So by the time that we ate them, they had so much land to run around. They were quite hard to eat. And to be honest, I do think that having that chicken farm has had a lot of impact on me being a vegan now, because it's like all those chickens that I killed back when I was 13. I also had a school canteen shop, so I got a PowerPoint presentation, and I presented to my dad saying that the school needed to have a canteen shop, and I had this little business plan set up for him, and he and my granddad were really into my little entrepreneurial endeavor since back then. But then again, just wanting my independence. You know, I was a high competitive performance swimmer, and I wanted to look for a scholarship, and I just wanted to do an OE and whatnot. You know, being a New Zealand citizen, because my mum's a Kiwi, I thought I should come to my motherland. And it was epic because I ended up in Kaitaia. So from a city of 10 million people where the poverty is insane, you know, we have a lot of poverty here in Aotearoa, but it isn't at the level that we see in countries like South America. There's a different kind of poverty, which is a mindset kind of poverty, and we see it a lot up north. And you know, it was great because I finished high school up north. I lived with a Maori family. I still need to work on my te reo. You know, it's not perfect, but it was really fun because something that I really like about Kaitaia, and I still go up almost every summer when I'm in the country, is that I feel like I'm home. You know, they make me feel like family. Just the values that Māori have really influenced me growing up. And, you know, it's just been fascinating. Decided to do business here. Started at Auckland Uni. Being dyslexic and having some form of ADHD and really quite impulsive and stuff and wanting to be doing stuff, I decided to change to AUT because it was smaller classrooms. But AUT changed my life. You know, I was able to travel the world to business competitions, I was able to do a lot of public speaking. I fell in love with this concept of social entrepreneurship. It was, you know, being someone who loved the hustle and, you know, loved selling and creating things. It was a new lens to business. So it was the aggregated value, you know, the environmental and social impact that you can do, even though you're generating some form of revenue, you know. And it was all about innovation and, you know, it was just really it really changed my way of thinking, because I wanted to get-go to start businesses. You know, I was 19, I had my first failed shop in Newmarket. I was trying to sell Indigenous crafts from South America. I have some Indigenous in me. I'm Muisca from Colombia, and you know, it was just really cool to kind of like introduce something from, you know, my people into the current market. But I didn't know my target market. I didn't know how to do P&Ls or KPIs, you know, as a little you know, so that kept on happening while I was studying until I created something with my ex-partner called the Pallet Kingdom. You know, it's a small social enterprise, and basically what you do is that you go around the city and you collect pallets that are about to be thrown away. And I used to work together with a group of people that have specific challenges, so depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, and we would just get together and we'd have a pallet party, you know, and we'd just break some pallets apart and build furniture that has been like commissioned to me. And, you know, that was a huge learning lesson, because we grew really quickly. We've never been able to meet our demand. I had to bring down the website because we got far too many orders. We didn't have the capacity. The only investment that I had was $1,000 at the beginning when I started the business, with a business competition. And, you know, that's, after that, I decided to stand for the local board. Now, I had other people who had a chance to talk a little bit more about themselves, but, you know, TOP for me is the only party that shows how we're going to actually fix the housing crisis, how we're going to address climate change holistically, how we're going to help people get free from the welfare trap. I'm not forgetting to mention, while I was blabbing off about my love for business, is that, you know, TOP for me is the only party that actually supports small businesses and help entrepreneurs thrive, not only through the small business recovery policy, but also through the universal base income. You know, just like I was talking before about the Pallet Kingdom, I only had one investment. So everything else that I was trying to start the company with was me bootstrapping and me being able to organically grow the business. So that's been something that, even now being an elected member of the Auckland Council, I have been able to push, you know, currently ideas that TOP are presenting through, you know, being able to change the RMA, being able to have a democracy reset, being able to advocate for the GST to be ring-fenced for city infrastructure. You know, TOP has so many great policies that, you know, we can influence throughout the TOP, and it's all thanks to all the good work of all you guys who are also talking here.
Nice. Thanks, Adriana. So everybody, we will be taking your questions. If you have any, you'll be putting them through if you're watching on Facebook or here in the chat, and we can get to your questions. But Adriana, I wanted to touch on what you just were mentioning at the end there, because as a small business owner, as a social entrepreneur, it would be great. I'm sure there are other people watching who are in maybe a similar situation to you, or even thinking about starting a small business. And maybe if you want to talk a little bit more about what the UBI would have meant for you right when you were just starting your business.
Yeah, totally. You know, so something that I really like to talk to young or aspiring entrepreneurs is, you know, don't ask yourself what the world needs, but ask yourself what makes you come alive. You know, because what the world needs is more people to come alive. So just throw yourself out there, you know, and basically just having time that you can basically allocate the $250. If you know, cost it for, let's say, if you get 25 an hour, 10 hours, so that you can just focus on being able to do your admin for your business. Admin, sometimes we get really focused on selling, that we're not really good at catching up with all our paperwork. just tools, you know, for example, for me specifically, power tools are really important and they're really expensive. Being able to, you know, when you get a big project, you just start, you know, buying a lot of stuff, and then sometimes you don't have, you know, a month that no one's actually selling things because you're in between contracts and situations like that. So it's a safety net. You know, I feel that our mental health would be way better knowing that at least we will be able to hit a point of this threshold that we'll have to surpass in terms of benefits and revenue. Yeah.
So it's just providing that extra confidence that you know you've always got that little bit of a backup there sitting there for when you're going through those lulls even, or waiting times perhaps. Cool. I think we've got some questions coming through. Is that right, Holly? So one question has come through from Alex. What is TOP's view or approach on the zero carbon bill? Are there any specific plans to contribute to environmental sustainability? Carbon. Yeah, I knew carbon. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, we have to follow the science on this, right? So we have to keep carbon emissions or our net to 1.5 degrees warming by 2050. If that is a realistic goal, which many experts are saying it's not, New Zealand needs to be investing $1 billion a year to changing our practices. Something that TOP's really supportive of as part of this overall strategy is not just focusing on planting our way out of this crisis that we've seen and we're hearing about a lot, because it's a really short-term way of thinking about this. And what we actually need to ensure is that all of our businesses, all of our practices are changing and are being forced to change. So we need to be increasing the price of carbon to really change practices and make sure that we're investing in infrastructure that's fit for the 21st century and going to be reducing our emissions. So that is a real focus for TOP, and you'll hear us talking more about this in the coming weeks when it comes to our focus on smart small business. Part of our focus on in the investment side and having grants available for small businesses is to help them move into better use of digital technologies, and also ensuring that they can move into more energy and resource efficient practices as well with grants. So it's all about making sure that businesses are part of that, part of the solution, right? So growing the economy, but reducing harm on the environment and reducing our emissions.
Yeah, and our cities have a big part to play in that as well. I mean, our cities, like all cities around the world, you know, are major consumers of energy and emitters of carbon. And one thing we have to realise there is that if we're serious about reducing our carbon emissions per person, we have to deal with our urban sprawl. We have to stop sprawling, because no matter what happens, if we do that, you know, shifting to thinking we're going to solve it by shifting to electric vehicles is not the answer, because when you're looking at overall carbon emissions, it's just not the stuff that comes out of tailpipes. It's the overall resources we're using to actually build cars and build everything in the first place. So we've got to really totally re-engineer our cities and our transport systems if we're really serious about becoming carbon neutral. You know, on a positive side, therefore, in terms of city development, given the impact that our cities have on our overall carbon emissions, you know, there is the opportunity to therefore really embrace proper sustainable city design and use that as a really important tool in allowing us to, you know, avert potential disastrous climate change, really.
Yeah, totally. Completely changing how we live our lives and how we see our cities as well. Cool. I see. Sorry, did anyone else want to jump in there? Otherwise, I can see some more questions coming through. Yeah, Tuariki.
I'll just say. Oh, you go, Tuariki.
Oh, just quickly, just the irony of COVID-19 is that the people of the world are more ready to tackle the environment problem. And that's because everything's shutting down. Economies around the world have shut down. All of a sudden, people in northern India who have never seen the Himalayas from 200 miles away can now see the Himalayas. China is completely free at the moment, and it's really showing, actually, we can do this. And so, like I said, the irony is that COVID-19, I think, is providing an impetus to go green. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Cam?
I just wondered if we understood the question and answered it properly, but if it was about the bill or about getting to zero carbon. But I guess TOP's absolutely committed to getting to carbon zero by 2050 by fixing the ETS, right? And I guess the view of the bill is that it's a plan to make a plan, but it doesn't actually. Emissions right now are going up, right? And all we're doing at the moment is planting pine trees to soak up the emissions, right? The danger is once you get to the end of planting the trees and you haven't dealt with the emissions, where to from there? So yes, TOP's absolutely on board with the objective to get to carbon zero by 2050, 100%, and going hard on the ETS in order to ensure that happens.
Yeah, let's stop making bigger and bigger promises and actually start actioning things.
And in fact, it did right what you say about densification and bringing the population in closer to the city centre, Brendon, and not sprawling, absolutely, but also having said that, the transport fleet is a big part of the problem, right? And so therefore fixing city development and densification is part of the answer, but also you'd notice that the current government has no plan to do anything about the biggest, easiest problem, the low-hanging fruit, transport fleet, right? We need to deal with that.
Exactly.
Cool. Move on then to another question here. So question from Hamish. Can we be sure that implementing TOP's fair tax policy won't raise the average amount of rent? Who wants to take this on first?
Well, I can start and someone else can chime in.
Okay, yep.
No, the policy is not about taxing just for taxing's sake. It's about doing what's required to really flatten that curve of our rising house prices. Now, it is a small tax, and because we also are wanting to implement or going to implement the UBI, most people will be better off anyway. Raising taxes on property doesn't necessarily mean that any rental property or any landlord is going to be paying any more tax. If they are already paying tax on a return on that rental, they won't be paying any more under this policy. So there will almost certainly be nothing to pass on to renters. And it's the only people who would be hit by this tax are people who are owning property and just leaving it sitting empty. These are the ones that we really want to target. And in that case, yes, they may have to pay more tax, so they are more than likely either going to actually want to rent that property or they're going to sell it, which gives people renting even more options. So it is most likely going to give more options to renters, not pass on any money to them. Anyone else got anything on that?
Yeah, just quickly, what we what we do know is that New Zealand has the highest housing costs, rental costs on the planet. And so if we don't change our system, the housing problem is just going to get worse. And we need to take the focus off creating this ridiculous, $1 million asset called your house. I mean, it's just crazy. You look at housing prices in the US and Germany, then even Australia, and you look at here. And yeah, I'm pretty sure our policy will bring rents down and housing prices down where they should be.
Yeah, the whole system is.
Sorry, for me, how I understood the policy, because I don't own a house, and obviously I'm I'm quite young and everything. But the general point for me was that if you tax a consumption good, that makes the price go up. But if you're taxing the profits that flow from a capital asset, like a house or a factory or something along the lines, then the asset price goes down. So essentially, you wouldn't actually be paying more rent. I'm sorry, Brendon, I cut you out.
Oh no, just going to comment. Our whole system of housing and tax is completely unsustainable. And if anyone really, gives a rat's what about their children and grandchildren, we have to make some big changes.
Yeah, that's totally right. Okay, so we'll move on because the next question is from Matthew. The simplification of the tax system, I assume he wants us to talk about that, and then how the UBI makes that progressive for Kiwis on a minimum wage and how that will be funded. Okay, so I think this question is largely about the UBI. And so for those just tuning in, our TOPS UBI policy is $250 a week for every adult, $40 a week for every child, no conditions and no questions asked. Importantly, no clawback. So what it effectively creates is a $39,000 a year tax-free threshold, because our UBI policy is mostly paid for by a flat tax of 33%. Which is together with the UBI, and it makes it a more progressive system than we have currently, because those at the bottom end, those on minimum wage, will be taken over the living wage. They'll be over $6,000 a year better off, and those earning the higher income, so in anything over 70,000 will still be better off, but only by about 3,900 a year. So the benefits really are stacked at the bottom because it is a really progressive system, and it is far more modern, simple and fair than what we have currently. So hopefully that answered most of your question. It's mostly funded, so it is a fully costed UBI policy, so it's mostly funded by that 33% flat tax, but it's also funded, a big chunk of it is funded by savings from things like savings in our bureaucracy, working for families, things like that, and also funded by a number of ways. So it can either be funded by the property tax, or it can be funded by dynamic benefits, which we're going to see, which is based on modelling. So that's going to be seen through things like the lower hospitalisation rates we've seen overseas, where the UBI has been trialled, lower rates in mental health issues, which we've also seen in the Finnish trial. They reduced by 1/3. And also people are training in, so they're going into higher paying jobs and paying more taxes. So that's all these matters combined is how it is fully funded. Did anyone else want to say anything else about our UBI policy on that?
Yeah, well, are you able to repeat that question, Shai? Can you still read it?
Yeah, the simplification of the tax system and how the UBI makes that progressive for Kiwis on a minimum wage, and how will that be funded?
Yeah, perhaps the simplification there is driving at the flat 33, isn't it? It's impossible to avoid. We've just seen this. Was that Hickey's article in The Guardian about the people in the top 1% wealth in New Zealand earning less than $70,000, right? Because they don't want to go into the top tax bracket. So when we've got a flat tax rate, it's very simple, very cost effective, very efficient to administer, and importantly, people on higher incomes or cheating on lower incomes can't avoid that 33. But with the $250 a week UBI, which is $13,000 a year, that $13,000 a year just happens to be the same number as the 33% tax on 39, isn't it? So that's the math. If people can kind of visualize that, if that's relatively easy to kind of see, if you earn up to, say, you're earning $39,000, you pay 1/3 of that in taxes, 13 grand. That's the same amount that you get back in the UBI, which means effectively you get to take home and keep your 39 net zero income tax in a roundabout way.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. My take on the UBI is that it encourages people to go to work rather than hunt around for every little tack on welfare policy that successive governments dream up, mostly to get a vote. And so you have this massively complicated system where beneficiaries are all on the hunt. Okay, what else can I do? What can I say? Yes, I will lie to them. I'm not really married. I'm not really living with somebody. And so they can claim benefits. The UBI will free them to go out and work because they won't be penalized for every extra dollar they make. That's the great benefit. Māori have suffered under the welfare system so that we have multi-generational unemployed, DPBs, you name it. And UBI, I think, will take them off that.
Yeah.
If you want to lock people in poverty, give them welfare, but then take it off them as soon as they try to better themselves. That's what our current welfare system is. That really sucks. TOP's UBI and tax reform policy is so beautiful in its simplicity and so effective in that it actually raises everybody up.
One of the things in pushing the UBI is you are effectively having to attack the icon of all icons for the Labour Party, which is Michael Joseph Savage, because he brought it in, and at the time it seemed like a good idea, but very quickly you realize it wasn't a good idea, but we're still stuck with it. And poverty is just expanding year after year, the welfare trap, and UBI, I think, will take us out of it.
And I think a lot of Kiwis who haven't ever themselves needed to go into the welfare system or needed to experience how it works aren't perhaps aware actually how punitive it is or how much our beneficiaries are punished, exactly as you both said, when they start to work. That level of that clawback, that abatement is so fierce that for so many of our beneficiaries, they're actually worse off financially as they enter the job market, to the point that it doesn't just not make financial sense. They can't afford to work. And I think if more Kiwis realised how broken our system really was, no one would stand for it any longer. And we just can't continue with something that is fundamentally flawed, so broken, and holding back Kiwis. As you said, Tuariki, generation after generation are being held back because of the system. We need to let it go. It hasn't worked. We need to do something different.
It hurts on the other side too, Shai, right? Like we talk a lot about the benefits to welfare recipients, but in fact, the current targeted welfare system hurts the economy too, right? It hurts employers. You've got primary producers, you've got fruit growers that can't get Kiwis to do that work because they're looking at the rates of pay and they're looking at their welfare, and the thing is, this just doesn't make any sense for me to do this, to take this work on. So once you get a UBI in place, all of a sudden there's a whole lot of people that are now off the couch and lining up to do that work, right? So it's I guess one of the reasons that a guy like Don Brash, who you wouldn't think would be a big fan of or very left thinking or having a great deal of I won't go there. Maybe not a guy that you would think would care a whole lot about beneficiaries, but he can see that what did he describe the UBI as? A no-brainer, right? He tried to get the National Party to adopt it when he was leading it.
Which is something that I love, right? Because I think it's so important to remind everybody that a UBI is probably as apolitical as a policy gets, because there are reasons why people who are left like it and reasons why people on the right like it.
Yeah.
Because it does so many different great things.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, totally. Okay, and I think we've got time for one very last question, unless Holly says otherwise, but I think this is the last question.
Asked, how do you feel being listed as left of Labour by the online website survey Vote Compass, and how do you feel this may be damaging TOP's chances of attracting blue-green voters?
Really good question.
And to clarify, that's on the economic axis, right? Axis.
Yeah, that's on the economic left and right axis is what she's
as
talking
opposed
about.
to the social, which is they had aligned up and down, I think, on the y-axis, right?
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I actually commented on that today, so it's a really good question. I actually commented on that today myself, and I was quite surprised that we were that far left. I would have had us bang on that middle line. Probably the height was probably about right in terms of progressive conservative is probably maybe about where we are. But yeah, in my mind, I feel like we're more in that central line. But
yeah, I think it's a weakness of those compasses. And, you know, you've heard Jeff before say, if you really want to label for top, call it radical centrist. You know, if you're trying to pigeonhole us, are we left? Are we right? Are we this, that, the other thing? He said radical centrist. That's actually a thing. If you go and have a look on Wikipedia, it's a defined term or criteria. But I see that plotting us on that compass there is really a weakness of that that whole compass concept. You know, like it's really just a bit of a nonsense. Personally, I guess I'm probably tend to be. I guess I'm sort of more left than centre myself personally, and I had kind of had the view that maybe top was sort of left. I've got to tell you, when I suggested that to Jeff, who Jeff Simmons, the party leader, right, who spent a lot of time in the Morgan Foundation developing a lot of this policy, he did a double take. He was really surprised that I said that. He was quite incredulous that I thought that that top was left. As an economist, as a guy that understands, you know, how to get the economy cranking and raise all of our incomes and make the country wealthier, I've got to tell you, Jeff Simmons doesn't see top as particularly left. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Adriana?
I'm so sorry. I keep on interrupting at the wrong time. The questions themselves were quite vague and broad, you know, so you can't really pinpoint a specific point because it's like much more, much less, not enough. You know, they're quite broad themselves. So
yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of a blunt tool, right?
Yeah, and then, you know, some would argue that the UBI is quite, because of the media that's happened, it's quite to the left, you know, the disparity of wealth. So that's also a concept that some would argue.
Yeah, go back to what I said in the introduction of myself anyway, that the whole idea that there's a, you know, what are you going to vote for? Are you going to vote left or are you going to vote right? You know, what do you think is the solution? Should we have a stronger economy and be harder on people and force them into work at low wages and try to encourage them to buy a house or something or other? Or should we take more care of people and be kinder and have a fairer society? You don't, it's the idea that it's a choice is just a nonsense, right? As why Top says we're in the centre, you can actually achieve all of those positive outcomes for everyone right across the spectrum. You don't have to go far left. You don't need to go far right. All you need is to follow the science, follow best practice, have some courage to fix the things that are going really badly wrong, like the tax, the distortion in the tax system and the housing market, and fix the welfare system, right, with the UBI. If you're willing to do things from right across the spectrum, the best practice stuff that it demonstrably will get the results, will get the outcomes that you want, then who cares about left or right?
That's exactly right. I was actually going to make a similar point in that, see, what Top has managed to do on all fronts is align economic policy with social policy, where one benefits the other. So it's win-win.
And environment.
And
environment.
And then on the other axis, we've aligned economic policy with environmental policy, so both win. And I think that's where you can get some of these types of polls or can give a slightly distorted view, because they're just not used to asking the right questions. You know, when you've got a party that has managed to do what Top has and actually be able to align everything like that. So economic policy is working with the others, with social and environmental.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about showing that progress is actually progress on all of those factors, economic, social, and environmental, for sure. Holly, was that the last question, or was there one more? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
I just want a quick comment on left and right.
Sorry, Tuariki.
Yeah, just a quick comment on left and right. I don't subscribe to left and right. As I said at the beginning of the introduction, I just subscribe to what is getting it right. And that's what it's about. I mean, I want a strong economy, but a strong economy doesn't make you right. It doesn't make you on the right. Is what is a strong economy? What will lead to it? People think, oh, it's building up the corporates. I don't think that's true at all. It's looking after the people. So, yeah, and where we fit on that spectrum of compass, couldn't really give a rat's ass, actually. I think it's about right. I think we're a lot closer probably to Labour and than we are to National at the moment. But as I said, it's about getting the right policy, and that's what top it is attractive for me, is put the policy aside, we look at the evidence, we interpret it and say, well, that's what we think should be done. And if the evidence changes, then top will change. So that's what I like.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so to wrap up, I thought it'd be fun if everybody could, this was a question, share their favourite music artist and then let the audience know where they can get more information to contact you.
Oh, well, that's easy. Fleetwood Mac. And you can contact me on my Facebook page or email me at deputyleader@top.org.nz. What a great question. Who's next? Brendon?
God, it's a damn hard one with musicians. I had that question the other night. Oh, and I gave the answer of Moby, simply because probably a little bit of an eclectic mix of different things that I've been into over the years. How to get hold of me? So either Brendon at top.org.nz or just search on Facebook or through the Top website.
Yeah. Cam?
I'm going to go with Bad Brains. Put your hand up if you've ever heard of them. And
Sorry, Cam.
And Dylan Tate knew who they were. And I'm Cameron.Lloyd at top.org.nz. And of course, I have a candidate page on Facebook, Cameron Lloyd, top candidate for Mount Albert or something like that, right? Pretty easy to find. Thanks for coming, folks. Thanks.
Nice. Tuariki?
Jimi Hendrix.
Nice.
Classic. Solid choice.
Because he's from Seattle.
And people can contact Tuariki also on Facebook through Top's page as well.
Yep, just you can type in my name and find all sorts of rubbish on there.
Question me about.
And last but not least, Adriana, who's yours?
I love DJs. All the music. I'll give a shout out to my favorite DJ because I love her. Her name is Watson DJ, and she's a mix of everything. And contact details, I'm pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. Christie NZ is my Instagram handle. Daniel Christie is my Facebook page. Someone start my IG again. ACHRISTIENZ. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and just my name and email. But you guys could easily find me. Please do get in touch though.
Cool. And to everybody who has tuned in and those in the room, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and hope you are doing well and staying safe. Take care.